You ever sit in a courtroom and watch an 8-year-old boy flip a whole eviction case upside down? I have. And let me tell you, I still don't know whether I should be proud or furious that it even had to come to that. It was a Tuesday morning in early spring, one of those muggy Florida days where the air feels like a wet blanket. Courtroom 3B smelled like floor wax and nerves. My name hadn't even been called yet, and already I felt like I was sinking into that stiff wooden bench. My son, Miles, sat next to me, backpack still slung over one shoulder like he'd just walked out of class. Because he had. I didn't have a sitter that day, and I wasn't about to miss this hearing. When the clerk called our case, Hayes versus Denton, I stood up slow, my knees aching from the shift. But the chair beside me scraped back before I could speak. Miles stood too. That part still plays in my head in slow motion, him standing up like it was the most normal thing in the world, clutching a beat-up legal pad with bent pages and coffee stains. "Your Honor," he said, calm as you please. "Can I say something for my mom?" There was a chuckle from the landlord's lawyer, James Dentona, real piece of work with a necktie like a banker and a smirk like he thought the whole room belonged to him. The judge, Honorable Marla Reyes, raised an eyebrow so high it practically left her face. "Young man," she said, "this isn't a school presentation. This is a legal hearing." Miles didn't flinch. "I understand, but I read the lease and the Florida tenant statutes, and I think I can explain what really happened." You could hear a pin drop. Even Denton stopped smirking for half a second. Judge Reyes folded her hands, gave me a look like she wasn't sure whether to call security or call Harvard Law. "Approach the bench," she finally said. Miles's sneakers squeaked against the tile as he walked up. I was frozen. I wanted to stop him. I really did. But something about the way he walked head up, shoulders square, told me I needed to sit back and let this happen. He looked up at the judge, chin tilted, and said, "We got an eviction notice without a 7-day repair notice. Section 83.56 says they have to give us that first. My mom emailed them about the mold. She has pictures, dates, and we have proof they never responded." The judge blinked, then leaned back in her chair. "Go on," she said. And just like that, my 8-year-old son started laying out our defense like a junior attorney. He cited specific dates: February 14th, when I first reported the water damage; February 18th, when I sent a second email; March 2nd, when the mold started spreading into Miles's closet. He had photos, printed and taped to a piece of cardboard from a cereal box. He referenced statute numbers, lease clauses, and even the Fair Housing Act. Denton tried to interrupt. "Your Honor, this child." But the judge raised her hand. "Let him finish." I think that was the moment it shifted not just the case, but the whole room. Suddenly, people weren't just watching. They were listening. Now, look, I never asked to be in that courtroom. I didn't grow up dreaming of becoming a legal case. I'm a nursing assistant. Been working double shifts since I was 21. I raised Miles on my own after his father decided fatherhood wasn't really his thing. We lived quiet, humble. No fancy vacations, no new cars. But I paid rent on time. Always. Then last year, our apartment started falling apart. First, it was the leak under the sink. Then the ceiling in the bathroom caved in. I put in requests, called the office, emailed. Got nothing but silence or excuses. Then came the mold. Miles started coughing at night, wheezing. I documented everything, took pictures, made logs, even mailed a certified letter. Still nothing. But the moment I filed a complaint with Housing Services, boom, eviction notice. They claimed I damaged the property, claimed I violated the lease, said we had 2 weeks to vacate. I went to legal aid, got assigned a public defender named Roy Mendez. Seemed nice, but overworked. We spoke once on the phone and he told me to show up with documents. He'd try to make it. That morning, he never showed. That's when Miles stood up. And that's when I realized he hadn't just been doing homework at the kitchen table all those nights. He'd been reading everything I printed, watching YouTube videos about renters' rights, taking notes in his school notebooks between math problems and spelling lists, preparing quietly, thoroughly, like he knew this day was coming. When the judge called for a recess, she said just one thing to Miles: "You were heard." I think that hit me harder than the ruling itself, because after 30 minutes, Judge Reyes came back, reviewed our folder, and ruled that the eviction was invalid. The landlord had failed to provide proper notice, hadn't responded to maintenance complaints, and failed to provide a safe living environment. The case was dismissed. Just like that. People clapped. Some gasped. One reporter followed us outside and asked for a quote. Miles just pulled a sandwich from his backpack and said, "I'm hungry." The video clip went viral that night. Miles Hayes started trending. News outlets called, nonprofits reached out. But what mattered to us was that, for once, someone listened. The landlord backed off. We stayed in that apartment until our lease ended. Then we moved. Better place. Fresh paint. No leaks. No mold. Miles got his own desk in his room, and I got a bathroom I wasn't afraid to walk into barefoot. And every now and then, someone will recognize ask if Miles wants to be a lawyer. He just shrugs and says, "Maybe, but I like dinosaurs more." Truth is, I don't care if he becomes a lawyer. What I care about is that when everything felt stacked against us, my son reminded me that we don't have to stay quiet. That sometimes, even when you're small and scared and tired, you can still stand UPenn sometimes. Standing up changes everything. So yeah, I watched my 8-year-old take on a landlord and win. And no, I don't recommend putting that kind of weight on a kid. But I also won't pretend I wasn't proud to see him rise when nobody else did. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have let your child speak? Do you think the system's really built to protect families like mine? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment. Tell me what justice looks like to you. And if this story moved you, share it. Maybe the next Miles is out there, watching, waiting for permission to raise his hand. Because sometimes, that's all it takes. Jalen didn't smile right away. Even when the courtroom cheered and the judge nodded her respect, he stayed still, hands flat on the edge of the table, just breathing. Tiana looked at him, her son, her baby who somehow just stood up and changed their fate like it was nothing more than a book report he'd rehearsed 100 times. They didn't talk much on the way out. Reporters were waiting by the steps. A woman from Channel 4 asked for a quote. Someone else offered them water. A few people just nodded like they were witnessing something bigger than they could explain. But Jalen just dug into his backpack and pulled out a peanut butter sandwich, unwrapped it, and took a bite. That was it. Like he'd just finished gym class. Tiana laughed, for the first time in what felt like months. That night, they didn't celebrate. No fancy dinner, no balloons. Just leftovers and cartoons. But there was something different in the air. Not relief exactly, because you don't unfeel months of fear overnight, but stillness. Like they could finally exhale without the floor falling out from under them. Over the next week, the calls came. Emails too. Legal aid groups wanted to meet. A civil rights organization offered representation. A national talk show producer left a voicemail. Jalen didn't want any of it. He didn't want to be on TV. He just wanted to go back to his desk, finish his science project, and maybe get a full night's sleep without dreaming of courtrooms and broken ceilings. But the world wasn't done with him. A week later, his principal called Tiana. One of the state's top law schools had invited Jalen to speak just 5 minutes at their youth civic leadership night. She nearly laughed, then realized they weren't joking. She asked Jalen if he wanted to do it. He thought for a moment and said, "Can I just read what I said in court?" He did, and they gave him a standing ovation. Professors, deans, students in blazers, all on their feet for a boy in a white polo and khaki pants who spoke like he wasn't supposed to, but did anyway. But while the world clapped, something else happened too. Quietly, the landlord, Mr. Gregory Lane, put the property up for sale. A reporter uncovered 3 more pending complaints from other tenants. The city quietly launched an inquiry into his practices. And while it didn't make front-page news, the walls started shaking. And not just his. Jalen's story lit up city council meetings, PDA forums, housing panels. People started showing up with printouts of statutes they'd never read before. Tenants began documenting everything. Landlords noticed. One judge even cited the Morris argument in a local training memo. But not everyone was thrilled. One radio host called it judicial theater and claimed the judge let a child manipulate the bench. A political columnist said it was concerning that due process had turned into a feel-good moment. Comments poured in, some calling Jalen brave, others calling the system broken. Tiana saw one of the worst ones, something about welfare queens weaponizing their kids. She cried, just once, then turned off her phone. Because none of them were there. None of them saw her tape up the ceiling leak with grocery bags, because maintenance never showed. None of them saw Jalen rubbing vapor rub on his chest before school, because the mold made his cough worse. None of them saw her circle bus fare out of a grocery budget or whisper, "We're fine," with shaking hands. So when they said it was all a show, she knew better. It wasn't a show. It was survival. 2 months later, they moved. A new place. 2 bedrooms, clean kitchen, no leaks. Rent was cheaper thanks to a local program for essential workers. Jalen got a new desk this time with drawers. And on his wall, a framed copy of the court ruling. Not because he was proud, but because he wanted to remember that moment. The moment when being small didn't mean being powerless. One night, as they folded laundry in the living room, Jalen asked her, "Do you think I changed anything?" She looked at him, really looked, and said, "You changed everything. Even me." He nodded, then added with a grin, "Still not doing dishes, though." She threw a sock at him. He ducked. They laughed. And just like that, it was quiet again. But make no mistake, this wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. Because the question still hangs in the air. Why did it take an 8-year-old to get someone to listen? Why wasn't someone there for Tiana before it came to this? And how many more kids are learning the law just to save their homes? That's a question this country has yet to answer. And maybe that's why stories like this matter. Not because they're rare, but because they shouldn't be. So if this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of your mom, or your kid, or that one neighbor you never checked on, scroll past. Leave a comment. Tell us what you would have done in that courtroom. Do you think the judge did the right thing? Should kids ever have to fight battles like this? And most of all, who's not being heard right now while we're watching in silence? Because like Jalen said, nobody else was going to.